You know, last week we made major modifications to this old 911 fuel tank to modernize it. And today we're going to continue to make modifications to it, major modifications to improve the performance of the entire fuel system. Check it out.
Garage time.
The goal for today is to get this electric fuel pump mounted into the tank and supported from a hanger off of this top flange. I'm also going to be working on the internal plumbing of the tank so I can use the factory exits out the back. And I also want to get this filler neck sorted out and a couple drain plugs welded in as well. This is my plan to hold the fuel pump. I'll probably change this clamp to something that's a little bit more correct in diameter so I don't have this big tail on here. But this will cradle the fuel pump. I'm gonna add a little stop on the bottom of this bracket. So if I do hit a big bump, you know, this thing is not gonna slide down and damage the inlet of the fuel pump. All right, I don't think this fuel pump is going to go anywhere. It's really sturdy and not twisting or pulling. I think one hose clamp is plenty. So this bracket just needs to be cut at the top, but I need to determine where the floor of the tank is and where the baffle box is so that this can all be at the right height. Okay, if you remember this baffle box from last week, it has these check valves installed. You can hear them in there ready to go to work. So the fuel pump is going to drop in, like I said, from the top. It gets mounted to the top of the tank, but it's going to drop in till it bottoms out pretty much. And then there's a cover plate that goes over the top. So I'm going to drill the hole now for the cover plate. I made a second one of these covers. Here's a second one. This one fits a little too loose. It's just a little too loose on the bottom. I think I drilled the hole just slightly too big. The next size down is this size, and it just barely fits over. All right, I'm happy with that. Fits pretty good. The fuel pump will probably be up about this high. That's totally at the bottom. And then if I can get it so that this lip of the pump is close to this plastic, that means any rattling around of this hanger isn't going to cause any sort of rubbing metal to metal. So the sequence is going to be, drop this in, drop this down, reach inside, put the nuts on. This portion of the tank is still crushed in. The bottom of the tank's just laying on top. It's not perfectly aligned, but sometimes it falls through, so this is the best I can do without holding it with my hands. But it's within striking distance. It's gonna need a little bit more massaging, during welding. But this should give me enough information about how deep the tank is. That's almost 14 inches deep. It's a pretty deep tank in this section because it has that sump underneath. I'm just planning with the orientation of the box to make sure that I account for the thickness of the box and also its position. So it's going to be positioned this way. And the fuel sock is oriented this way too, so it goes towards the center of the tank. Ideally, this is in the center of the tank. All right, this is 12 gauge metal. I want to cut out this football shape to cap the top of this hanger to give it something to attach to. And I would normally cut this out with my plasma cutter, but this car is behind me and I can't make sparks and damage the paint on that. It takes more time to take it out in the driveway. So, you know, when you have nice things, it's hard to work around. So, I just wanted to share that with you guys. Okay, this fits okay. I had to use my bench grinder to smooth it out, but the end result is just fine. I'm going to weld this on and add some studs. That's the hanger. It should be complete now. Let me see how it fits. Yeah, that's perfect. There's going to be an aluminum plate that comes down over the top of this with some nuts on here, and then it'll screw down in here. Fuel pump has two things it needs. It needs the electrical power, so I need to have an electrical connector that comes through this cover plate. And I also need to figure out what to do with the outlet of the fuel pump. I mean, fuel is going to be coming out. The exit of the factory is underneath the bottom. And rather than create a bunch of plumbing inside the trunk area, I'm going to do some internal plumbing in the tank that's going to take the output of this pump, bring it up here so that it can be connected and disconnected, and then route it back down to these factory exits. I don't like that there's no fittings on these, there's no barbs. You know, I'm going to be using fuel injection, which is pretty high pressure, and you don't want those shooting off. Okay, my plan is to weld this AN fitting onto the tank, and then there's going to be a line welded to the side here, and that line is going to run out, down, follow this curvature over to this opening, and that's going to allow me to make the connection between the fuel pump and the fuel line, but that junction is going to be right here at this opening, so I can get wrenches in there and tighten that up. So this is internal plumbing. It's something that I thought of. I don't know how great of an idea it is, and I'm going to be doing some unconventional things here with the fittings. But for me, I like to keep it sort of internal and all clean. I'm using this bender. This is 3/8 tubing, and it feels like it's collapsing the tube. Doesn't feel great. Yep, look at that. Completely collapsed it. I was hoping this bender would be the right tool, but apparently it's not even close for this diameter tubing. So I'm going to have to come up with a better way to bend the tubing. I don't need real tight bends because it's a flowing snake that goes up here to this hole, but I got to do better than that. The good news is the car made it home without a scratch.
Let's go.
Okay, the other thing to think about is where this filler goes. This is where I cut the factory one, and there's a huge hole here as it is. I thought maybe I could use it again, but this is right where that fuse panel goes, and when you're filling, it's going to be more convenient to maybe fill from the front. There'll be a bumper here, but perhaps filling, moving this over to this area would make the most sense. That way there, the gas nozzle's not resting on the fender. Maybe the hose comes in from this direction. So maybe right there. So the highest part of the tank is clearly right here. Maybe a ½ inch lower the way the car sits right now. And it is sloped on a driveway. But the same problem with this side is that if you have a fuel hose coming over the paint, you'd have to have a towel or something to prevent it from scratching the fender. Or you could fill from the front and then you're draping the hose kind of over the fender. Maybe just throw a towel down. And so what's your vote? Number 1, number 2, or number 3? I got my paint all dirty. Look at that stuff from the tank. I'm also curious about, if it does spill, where does the fuel go? So one idea I had is take this bowl, this is a little parts bowl, magnetic base, and weld it onto the tube. So drill a hole in this bowl and poke the tube through. So if there is any spilling on the neck here, or if there's any leaking on the neck, it will fill up the bowl as opposed to just going all over the paint. The diameter of this little embossment here looks to be perfect. So if I drill a hole right on that embossment, weld it on, that could be cool. Maybe run a little vent tubing off to the side. If it does fill up with fuel, it'll just pour out to the outside of the car. There's more work to do, but I'm gonna end this one here, guys. I'm missing out today on all the Porsche Week activities, so I'm gonna try to go to at least a few of them. Take care.